About a fortnight after I had been set free, Retold came to see me in private. He explained that all was not well in Lilliput. There were two groups at court, the Tremexan and the Slamexan, who hated each other. The Tremexan wore high-heeled shoes, the Slamexan low-heeled ones. The present emperor favoured the Slamexan and wore lower heels than anyone else. His son, however, the heir to the throne, wore one heel higher than the other, which made him hobble, indicating that he leaned a little towards the Tremexan. So here we go. We have the emperor with low heels, and we have his son, one low and one high heel. The two groups were always plotting against each other. To make matters worse, the country had been at war for 36 months with the neighbouring country of Blefuscu. The cause of the war had been eggs. Originally, everyone in Lilliput and Blefuscu had opened their eggs at the larger end, like here. But the current emperor's grandfather had cut his finger as a boy when breaking open an egg at big end, and because of this his father, the emperor at the time, ordered everyone to open their eggs at the smaller end, and the population resented this terribly. One emperor lost his life and another was deposed in the ensuing troubles. 11,000 people were thought to have been killed rather than agree to break their eggs at the smaller end. Many others flew to Blefuscu. Big Endian books were banned and Big Endians prevented from having jobs. The emperor of Blefuscu even accused the Lilliputian emperor of creating a division in the religion by going against the great prophet Lustrog in the Drundrekel, their holy book. Lustrog stated that all true believers shall break their eggs at the convenient end. Convenient doesn't mean the larger or the other end. According to the Blefuscan emperor and all the other Big Endians, this was obviously the large end. The Big Endian Lilliputians who had fled to Blefuscu finally persuaded the emperor there to wage war on Lilliput. So far, the Lilliputians had lost 30,000 soldiers and sailors in the war, along with 40 large ships and countless smaller ones. Blefuscu had lost even more, but had managed to assemble a big fleet and was preparing to invade Lilliput. The emperor had sent Retold to ask for my help, although as a foreigner I felt I should not interfere in the arguments of the Lilliputians. I was prepared to defend the emperor and his country against invaders. The island of Blefuscu lay around 800 meters off the northeast coast of Lilliput. No contact was allowed between the two islands, and I had avoided that side of Lilliput so that no Blefutians could have seen me or had any idea that I existed. I hatched a bold plan to capture their fleet. I asked for a large number of the strongest ropes and heaviest iron bars to be brought to me. The ropes were like thin string and the bars about as thick as knitting needles. I twisted the bars together in threes and bent the ends to form hooks. I then tied lengths of rope, also twisted in three, to the hooks and carrying these set off for the channel separating Lilliput from Blefuscu. Just before high tide I waded out. I had to swim across the deeper middle part, but within half an hour I was approaching Blefuscu. The enemy sailors were so frightened when they saw me that they all jumped into the water and swam for their lives. They then gathered in a great group back on shore, and there must have been about 30,000 of them. Having reached the deserted ships, I started to fix a hook to each one, gathering the ropes attached to the hooks in a great bundle as I went along. The Blefuscians tried to stop me by bombarding me with arrows, which stung terribly. My main fear was that they would hit me in the eye and blind me. And then I remembered the pair of glasses hidden in my secret pocket. I fixed these firmly on my nose and was able to continue with my plan. So this is what Gulliver was planning to do, to hook up the ropes to the boats and undertake, not the boats, sorry, big ships, and then to take them to Lilliput. Yes, and this is him swimming back to Lilliput. As soon as I had hooked up all the ships, I gave a great heave and nothing moved. The ships were still anchored fast, so I dropped the ropes and, getting out my knife, quickly cut through all the anchor chains. Then off I set back to Lilliput, pulling 50 of their largest ships behind me. When the Blefuscians saw what I was doing, they let out a deafening scream of grief and despair. As soon as I was out of range, I stopped to pick out the arrows that had stuck into me and rubbed in some of the soothing ointment that had been given to me when I first arrived in Lilliput. I waited for the tide to drop a little and continued on. The Lilliputians first saw the fleet approaching when I was in the middle of the channel. They could not see me because I was up to my neck in water, and they were convinced that I had drowned and that the enemy was sailing over to attack them. They were about to despair when they spotted me. They let out a great cry of triumph, and as soon as I reached shore, the emperor made me a nardak, which is the highest honor in the country. The emperor was overjoyed at the victory and asked me to go back and capture the rest of the Blefuscian ships. He decided that he wanted to conquer Blefuscu and turn it into a province of Lilliput. Everybody would be forced to break their eggs at the small end, and as far as he was concerned, he would be the emperor of the whole world. I tried to dissuade him from this plan, saying I didn't want to play any part in turning a brave people like the Blefuscians into slaves. Many government ministers agreed with me. However, the emperor never forgave me for opposing him, and as I was soon to discover, began plotting against me with several of his ministers. About 3 weeks after I had captured the ships, ambassadors arrived from Blefuscu with an offer of peace. I helped them a little in the negotiations, and when a peace treaty had finally been signed, the ambassadors paid me a visit. They invited me in turn to visit the Emperor of Blefuscu. During my next audience with the Emperor of Lilliput, I asked his permission to travel to Blefuscu. He agreed, but in a very cold way. I did not understand why the Emperor was being so unfriendly, but I later learnt that Flimnap and Bolgolam had persuaded him that I had been plotting against him with the Blefuscian ambassadors. I began to realize how treacherous courts and ministers could be. About this time, I had a chance to do a great favor for the emperor. At least I thought so at the time. One night I was woken by hundreds of people shouting at my door. Some court officials explained that the Empress's rooms in the royal palace had caught fire. I rushed to the palace. The Lilliputians were already trying to put the fire out with buckets of water, but these were proving useless. I could have smothered the flames with my coat, but had left it in my house. The fire was spreading, as it looked as if the whole palace was going to burn to the ground. And then suddenly I had an idea. That evening I had drunk a huge amount of a very tasty kind of wine called Glimigrim, so I had a very full bladder. I quickly relieved myself in the direction of the Empress's apartment and was able to put the fire out in 3 minutes. Having done so, I immediately went back home. I knew it was strictly against the law for anyone to make water within the palace walls, but hoped the Emperor would understand my reasons and forgive me. I heard that he did order the chief court to issue me with a pardon, but I never received it. What's more, the Empress was apparently so disgusted with what I had done that she refused ever again to use the rooms where the fire had broken out, and she too began plotting against me. So here is the picture of Gulliver trying to put out the fire.